everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so excited. There's an awful lot of you. So we are beyond honored to have our guest today. We are actually their bookstore event. The one Bob came out yesterday, and it is totally amazing. So I am going to first read a little bit about the one and only Bob, and then I'll introduce Catherine. So Bob is an independent dog. He knows he could still make it on his own if he had to, even though he now has a home with his human friend Julia, regular meals, belly rubs, and a bed to call his own. But most important of all, he still gets to visit his best friends at their new home. Ivan, a silverback gorilla, and Ruby, a young elephant, live nearby in a sanctuary. A home for Bob, a home for his friends, and all the treats he could want. But something's missing. Someone is missing. Someone who Bob thought was gone forever, until the day he realizes she's not. Catherine Applegate is the Newbery Medal winning and #1 New York Times best-selling author of numerous books for young readers, including the one and only Ivan, Crenshaw, Wish Tree, the Endling series, the Roscoe Riley Rules chapter book series, and the Animorphs series. And she lives in California, where she is today. But we are so honored and privileged. So welcome, Catherine Applegate.
I'm so thrilled to be here with you. I wish I were there in the store, able to, hug and shake hands and connect a little differently. But this is pretty cool. And I'm so glad there are so many folks out there with some questions, I hope, maybe about writing. I hope I've got some young writers out there, or certainly some young readers.
It's so cute. I've already started to get questions, and we haven't even started talking.
Excellent. I love it.
So, can people read the one and only Bob without having read the one and only Ivan?
Absolutely. I made sure of that. In fact, that's a weird thing about writing a sequel, because first of all, you had that first experience with a book, and you want to make sure that people aren't disappointed with the second experience. And also, there's all this information from the first book. So I talk a little bit about Bob's history and his early friendship with Ivan and with Ruby. So all that's covered. You don't have to read Ivan first. Ivan is interesting because Ivan's own story was inspired by a true story. And so it's kind of fun to read that too, to know about his crazy early life. But Bob stands all on its own, I think.
Now, why did you want to write about Bob?
I didn't for a while. I mean, it's been 8 years since I wrote Ivan. And kids, when I went to, because the reason I didn't was because I've written so many series books. I've written, and with Animorphs I wrote with my husband. There were 64 books in that series, I think, and we wrote maybe 30 or 40 of them. And that was a book every single month. So I kind of love having a book with a beginning and a middle and an end. But as I did school visits over the years for Ivan, I kept having kids coming up to me and they'd go, "When are you doing the one and only Bob?" And Bob was absolutely my favorite character in Ivan. He's the comic relief. He's kind of sarcastic and scrappy, and I really love the idea of going back and connecting with him. I just didn't feel like I was quite ready. And then one day I realized I missed that format. If you look at, reach for a minute here. If you look at the one and only Bob, it has a lot of white space in it, like Ivan did. It's not quite poetry. Ivan had a lot more, I think, metaphors and that kind of thing in it. But it's got a lot of space. And I myself was a very reluctant reader growing up, and and I'm still kind of a slow reader. And I like having all that space. I think it makes it an easier read. So I wanted to go back to that format. It's very important to start when you're writing a story to think about character and how that character is going to change over the course of a story and not focus so much on message. The message sort of comes on its own and evolves. But I found that an awful lot of what Bob was dealing with had to do with forgiveness and how we forgive and when we forgive and how we forgive ourselves, because a lot of times we're hardest on ourselves, I think, don't you, when we make mistakes. So Bob has to figure that out because his tough guy exterior, I mean, he's funny and tough and streetwise, and he's not gonna, he's never gonna admit that he has self-doubt, but to himself, he starts to realize that he's got some healing to do. And working through this rescue mission kind of helps him decide where his real priorities are.
So the character that Bob is looking for, so can I say her name?
Oh yeah, of course.
Is Boss. So I want to know more about Boss and where that came from.
Well, Boss is Bob's sister. And the question with Boss was I could have made her any kind of character. And I thought about different kinds of characters. She could have been very gentle and sweet. I thought about making her kind of prissy and princessy. And at the end of the day, I thought, no, let's make her kind of tough and no nonsense. And she's been out on the world, just like, even more so actually than Bob. So it's kind of Bob, getting a taste of his own medicine, and that was more fun to write. It turned out,
because she's such a great character. I love just even the name. Just when you mentioned, it was just like amazing.
It's a perfect name, isn't it?
It definitely was. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I am totally ready.
What's your favorite animal?
Dog. I know it's a cliche, but they're so funny.
What's your favorite food?
Popcorn.
What is your favorite routine when you're writing?
I started to say procrastinating, but I think my editor is listening. So my favorite routine is, I'll show you. I like to have coffee and water. And usually I have my dog Stan sitting on my lap.
Where is Stan?
Stan's outside. He may come in later and join the group. He's quite a ham.
What's your favorite movie?
A movie I loved, Babe. Do you remember Babe with the pig?
Yes.
Oh, that was so beautifully done. I love that movie.
What's your favorite sport?
Well, that would be a tough napping. I'm really good at napping.
Do you cook?
No. My husband cooks very well. And I literally, to this day, I make toast and boil water, and that's about it. It's worked out very well for us.
What's your most favorite dish that he makes?
Well, let's see. He makes a nice creme brulee, all fancy. Yeah.
Where's the place that you've loved the most to live?
Oh, wow. That really is hard because I've lived all over the country. And I lived in Italy for a little while too. I really love LA. I know it's not everybody's cup of tea, but I love it. I love the sun, and there's a kind of creative energy that I love.
What's your current favorite book?
Current, like I just read it?
Yeah.
I just read Rebecca Stead's The List of Things That Will Not Change. It's gorgeous. Another one that's coming up that I'm really excited about is Jennifer Choldenko's new book called Orphan 11. It's got a baby elephant in it.
What's your favorite book from when you were little?
Oh, Charlotte's Web, hands down.
Let's see. What is your favorite vacation?
I feel like I'm speed dating. My favorite vacation. Oh, I love to travel. I'll go anywhere. I'm like the only person on the planet who likes airports.
Wow.
I
So-
know.
We'll finish with a question that I always ask. So, as a bookseller, I have 10 seconds to sell a book to someone. Can you do your 10-second pitch for the one and only Bob?
Wow, you end with a doozy. If you love dogs, and even if you don't love dogs, I think you're going to love Bob.
I like it. Very good.
Thank you. I'm a writer.
So we'll get to some of these questions. So, were you inspired by Jane Goodall at all?
Oh, when I grow up, I want to be Jane Goodall. And there may be issues there because I'm getting up there, but oh, she's my hero. I think she's had the most fascinating life. I was able to go hear her speak live and get a book signed by her, and just being within inches of her was inspiring. I love the idea of looking at an animal, a species, and trying to figure out what's going on in their head. In fact, I think that's how I went from wanting to be a vet to being a writer who writes a lot about animals, because I was more fascinated by their psychology, by how they're perceiving the world. And I just think sitting there and observing chimps all day in the wild, as long as you have like a decent Starbucks nearby, would be great.
Was it difficult to turn Bob into a main character from a sidekick character?
That's a really smart question. That's a good writer question. Yeah, especially when your character is comic relief and you suddenly make them the main focus. They go from just being funny to being complex, hopefully. And that means some of your readers may be a little disappointed. I mean, Bob isn't always funny. He's funny a lot, I think, in this book, but he also has some things to figure out. He's a more well-rounded dog. And yeah, that is a little bit scary when you do that.
So what is your favorite part of the book?
Oh, the last page. It is. And that's very much because of the illustration that goes with the last page. I love the illustrations in this book. Patricia Castillo, I guess she showed the cover already. I mean, she's just amazing, and does such expressive animals. I knew she was amazing when I saw her take Ivan and give him all these very delicate, nuanced expressions. So she's outdone herself with Bob, and the very last illustration is just, it makes me cry every time I see it.
Well, now, speaking of Ivan, there's a movie coming out, is there not?
There is indeed. And believe me, there was a point, I always tell young writers this is so important. Writing is very frustrating sometimes, and I know a lot of you are out there working on your stories and you're just going, oh, it's in my head one way, but then on the page, it's not what I want. That's because writing is about making tons of mistakes and about rewriting and rewriting and rewriting. And when I got halfway through Ivan, I pretty much got ready to throw it out. I just thought who on earth is going to read a book written from the point of view of a gorilla? And I was very frustrated, but I went back to it and I tried it again. And I realized that if I approached it a little differently, I might actually have a story there. So if you told me then that it was going to end up being a movie, I would have said you were crazy, because it was just this little idea floating around in my head. The movie is supposed to come out August 14th, and I don't know for sure if it'll happen because, of course, theatrical releases are all kind of delayed right now because of the virus. I was able to go to the set though in London and watch them filming, and it was fascinating. The Big Top Mall had become this giant set just outside of London in the very same building that they filmed James Bond movies, which in itself was crazy. And that day, Bryan Cranston was there. He plays Mac, and he was talking the whole time to a giant chicken wire elephant who was supposed to stand in for Stella and talking in front of a green screen. And they do that, of course, because later they go in and feed in the computer graphic images. And the CGI in this is fantastic. It opens, Ivan is looking right at you with the voice of Sam Rockwell. And you are absolutely certain you are looking at a talking gorilla. It's beautifully done. So watching that unfold was just surreal because I honestly never dreamed in a million years that it would happen.
Now, will there be another Bob and Ivan book?
Oh, I never even thought of that. Literally never thought of that. So I'll give you a percentage for sure. I haven't thought that far ahead. I mean, when you're done with a book, you just kind of, like I said, it's almost like you've given birth. It's a big deal. I just had my book birthday, and so I haven't thought that far ahead. It was a challenge actually to get all the characters back together because Ivan and Ruby have a whole new life, and Bob had a whole new life. But fortunately, with the help of a very large hurricane, I was able to do it.
So we have a question. How long did the revision take for the one and only Bob?
Bob was faster than some books, and I think it's because I knew the characters. I have a wonderful editor, Tara Wykeham, and she helped me, put the pieces together. And it, at the end of the day, it was a faster process than it sometimes is. A book can take a year or two for a lot of writers. I know writers who've taken 10 years to write a book. Back when I did Animorphs with my husband, we wrote a book a month. So it's quite variable. It really is. I would say with Bob, it was a few months.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was pretty fast.
Yeah. So now, where do you write your books? Like in your house?
Well, I'm actually where I write right now. I'm looking out at Silver Lake, where I live in Los Angeles, and there's lots of light, which is nice. But I found, and this is really, I hate to admit this because I used to think I needed the perfect office and it all had to be perfect. You can write anywhere. I wrote, I can't remember, a single title. It might have been Home of the Brave. I wrote a whole bunch of it driving home from Disney World with my kids whining in the backseat and my husband blaring, punk rock on the radio. So I learned at that point, actually, you can obsess over where you're writing, but it's much more important to be writing. I like working on a laptop, but I still like paper too. I like a lot of writers. When I can do that, I have my trusty pencil.
Do you carry a notebook with you?
I always have paper of some kind. I mean, it can be toilet paper, it can be a napkin, it can be a Post-it note. But some of your best ideas happen when you're in the middle of something else, when you're eavesdropping on a really good conversation and you think, oh man, I got to use that someday. In fact, Ivan was a newspaper clipping from the New York Times, and it said, "Gorilla sulks in Tacoma Mall while his future is debated." And I thought, that is the weirdest story I've ever heard. I would love to write that someday. And I cut it out and I threw it in a box. So I really recommend young writers keep a notebook or, a file on your phone or whatever it takes, because a lot of times the ideas kind of have to sit there for a while, before you know what they're going to do.
Now, so you type your drafts, or do you handwrite?
Mostly if I'm doing something like I'll play with a picture book or poetry, that feels better on a piece of paper to me. It slows you down and you think about the words. Usually, though, I do use a laptop. I'm an Apple person, which sometimes gets me into trouble when I go to school visits because not all schools are as compatible with Mac, but I love them. And so I carry my laptop everywhere.
So now, what are you working on now? Are you taking a break from writing, or are you doing something?
I am working on the third book of Endling. It's done. I'm doing the tweaking it, rewriting part, which is actually my favorite part. The first drafts are hard for me, but once I've got words on the page, I like the rewriting part. My husband's actually the reverse. He loves, the empty page in front of him, the laptop just freshly opened, and he hates rewriting. So, I think all writers have their strengths and weaknesses, things they like about writing and things that are harder. And that's perfectly normal. And we all write in different ways. You're going to hear from teachers a lot. And this is very true, of course, when you're doing a paper and something important for school, that there's a certain way to do it. But when you're writing for yourself, it's different for everybody, I think. You just do it however it's fun for you, do it that way.
Well, how did you start writing books?
Oh, I took a very circuitous path. Not unlike a lot of writers I know. I had a degree in English, became a lousy waitress, became a lousy typist, became a lousy plant waterer. And then one day I thought, okay, maybe I should just be a lousy writer because this isn't very much fun. And I started out slowly as a ghostwriter. And I wrote 17 Sweet Valley Twins. I know there are moms in the audience right now who remember Sweet Valley. Jessica was the evil twin. And I did tons of ghostwriting for Mickey Mouse and Aladdin and Little Mermaid. I know Little Mermaid by heart. I once had this elaborate discussion with an editor about whether the Little Mermaid Ariel could fit in the blowhole of a whale. And that's when I knew I had a really weird job. So I started out ghostwriting. I even wrote a couple of adult romances because I thought they'd be easy. They weren't. And finally, I realized how much I loved writing for kids and slowly started doing more and more longer series.
So now, how do you start a book?
I used to think this was crazy, but I've talked to a lot of writers who are like this. I have to have a first line that I really like, or a first paragraph, before I can really get moving. It's almost like I gotta get that freighter moving with a little bit of momentum. Everybody's different, and the thing you have to remember is that no matter what you write, it's going to be bad the first time. It's going to be crummy. There's a wonderful book. It's more for adult writers, but I think some older readers would enjoy it too. It's called Bird by Bird, and it's by Anne Lamott. And in it, she reminds us all that your drafts are going to be crummy. And the important thing is just get those words on the page, no matter how inadequate they seem at the time, because that's where it all starts. And underneath all that, there may be a little tiny diamond. I start out slowly and with frustration, and then I reach a point where I think this is the thing I've ever written, and then the next day I think it's the worst thing I've ever written. And because I've done it a lot, I know that pattern now. And I think that's one of the things that young writers miss. The more you write, the more you realize that there are good days and bad days, and highs and lows, and that it's very much about loving the work. It's not so much about being published or whether somebody else likes it. It's about you loving it.
So now, do you come up with the titles first or last, or has a title ever what you thought was going to be to begin with, and it totally changed at the end.
Oh, titles are hard. They really are. It was funny with The One and Only Bob because I wanted the same cadence, the same rhythm as The One and Only Ivan. So we sat around, and by we, I mean, the entire editorial department and my editor and publicity and everybody, and we're all trying to figure out a really cool title that will kind of remind people of The One and Only Ivan. And then one day we looked at each other and realized that every school visit I went to, kids were going, "You can write The One and Only Bob." So they kind of already tied it for us, and it seemed so obvious when we got there.
Okay, one final question. What authors inspire you?
Oh, so many. Well, at the top of the list would be E.B. White, who wrote Charlotte's Web and Trumpet of the Swan and Stuart Little, because I think those books are timeless. Contemporary writers I love Kate DiCamillo for her heart, and Rebecca Stead for her incredible ability to pick just the right word. Jason Reynolds, because he's able to just energize a page and just capture it, and it's always wonderful to see what he's going to do. Linda Sue Park has a new book out called Prairie Lotus, which is sort of a reinvented, revisited Little House on the Prairie that's magnificent, really full of fascinating characters. And that's just a handful. I mean, I could go on all day. The best thing you can do if you want to be a writer is read. And it took me a long time, as I said, to get to that point. But that's where you learn how to do it. You see how other people have taken a story and manipulated the words and turned it into something that you believe in. So if you're going through a bad period and having trouble writing, just read a lot, and it'll take you back full circle.
Well, The One and Only Bob. What is it? And then we'll sign off. What, after kids read this and everybody reads this, what do you want them to take away from it?
If they had a good time for an hour or 2 or 3, I'm totally happy. That's all I want.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you, Catherine Applegate, for staying with us, working through the Wi-Fi connection, and thank all of you, because you guys kind of, stuck with us. This is amazing. It is, for RJ Julia, it is truly an honor to have you and to be able to sit in this chair in this fabulous bookstore, and talk to you. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been just amazing. We hope you've all had fun. Thank you for the questions. And don't forget, you can order